Welcome to Pyrography Made Easy. I'm Brenda. I was requested to provide a more detailed explanation of how to create the wispy hairs against the dark background on the Bobcat artwork. Well, unfortunately, I don't have those video files anymore, so I created this quick demonstration to help explain how to do that. I'm also going to show you a little bit from another project where I'm just creating a couple of little wispy hairs onto a dark background. So hopefully between the two, it will answer all of the questions. So let's get started. Example 1. The pencil line represents the top edge of an animal. Now let's add fur to the animal. I like to use a zigzag burn stroke for this. If you prefer something else, like burning single lines, then please use that method. How the fur is created is not important. What is important is to extend the burn strokes beyond the pencil line. Make sure to vary how often and how far you burn past the pencil line. The burn marks that stick up above the pencil line will be the wispy hairs. We want those wispy hairs to have variety to look realistic. That's why you need to vary their placement and length. Once the fur is in place, erase the pencil line. With the pencil line gone, it is easier to evaluate the wispy hairs and the overall fur. It is at this point I often burn single lines. I use the razor edge of the shader so the lines are very thin. You can also use a writer pen tip. It is important to start the line on the animal and end it on the background. The reason is that the lines start out thicker than they end, and we want the thinner end to be in the background. Rotate the board and burn zigzags or single lines along the edge of the fur. Keep your burn strokes irregular, and don't worry about burning over some of the wispy hairs. Also, don't worry if it doesn't look awesome at this point. We will be doing some detail work after the background is in place. As you can see, I am using a zigzag burn stroke along the edge of the hair. Then I use uniform strokes to fill in the rest of the background. I have got the heat turned up just enough to get a dark burn result, but I still have to reburn to get a black color. This is the perfect heat setting. The reason is that burning at really high heats will discolor the wood around the pen tip instead of just where the pen tip is touching the wood. This is called overburn. If you are burning hot enough to produce overburn, there's a good chance that the overburn will obliterate the wispy hairs. Here's how the fur line looks so far. Use the front edge of a sharp knife, I'm using an X-Acto knife, to gently scrape in some wispy hairs. Start scraping a hair in the fur and end it in the background. Make sure to vary how long and how bright you make these hairs. The brightness of a wispy hair is controlled by how much of the background burn marks you remove. To get really bright or pale hairs, you need to remove all of the burn marks and reveal the underlying wood. This will take several passes of the knife to achieve. To get less bright hairs, just don't scrape as many times. You want a variety of hair lengths and hair colors as you work. If you are working on plywood, be extra gentle as you scrape. It is very easy to splinter or chip off small slivers of wood from the plywood. Often, things look different depending on the rotation of the board. So I rotated the board back to normal, and I'm making a few of the hairs brighter. I am also adding a couple of really long hairs here and there. If your hairs got too thick, or if some splinters of wood chipped off, Then use the razor edge of the shader or a writer pen tip and darken up the background around the hairs. You can also make some of the hairs thinner by burning right next to them. I do want to mention, if at any point you're happy with how the wispy hairs look, then stop working. There's no need to continue on. Example 2. Begin by creating your wispy hairs. I am using a writer pen tip to burn some thin lines that vary in direction and the amount of curl they have. Afterwards, switch to a shader pen tip and begin burning very carefully around the hairs. Now I will mention, even though I'm using a shader, if you feel more comfortable using a writer pen tip for this, please do so. Something else that might be helpful is to draw over the lines using a white charcoal pencil. This will make the hairs easier to see. Plus, the charcoal will resist the heat of the pen tip. Now I do want to point out that charcoal will not completely block the heat, so avoid burning over it. One more thing, do not use a colored pencil in place of the charcoal. Colored pencils contain wax, and that wax will melt and char under the heat of the pen tip. I like to use a writer pen tip and tidy up the hairs. I personally think it is easier to see what I'm doing using the writer pen tip. Plus, it is easier to be more precise. What I am doing is reducing the width of the hairs, making the hairs come to a fine point, and creating more gaps of various sizes between the hairs. I am using a micro writer pen tip by Colwood, but any writer pen tip will work. The last thing I do, if needed, is use the edge of a sharp knife to create some wispy hairs or restore hairs that got burned over. Use a very gentle pressure when scraping to prevent deep gouges from forming into the wood. If you're working on plywood like I am, be extra careful because it is so easy to remove small splinters of wood from the plywood surface. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you found the information helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.